What's up guys, Austin from Billetworkz here. Today I'm going to show you how to install your Billetworkz short shifter for your 2022 BRZ. So let's get started. So the first step I'm going to do is remove this plastic cover, which will expose a 10mm bolt. There's one on each side of the console. So I'm going to do the passenger side first. Next, I'm just going to remove the shift knob. That just spins right off. Set that to the side. Then I need to remove the e-brake boot. And with that, I'm just going to grab the fabric and pull straight up. And we'll just completely pull that over the handle. That'll just slide right off. I'm going to put this in fourth to give me some more clearance. Next is we have to remove this rectangular piece of trim. But before I try and remove that, I'm going to use some painter's tape to protect some of the corners. And then I have these trim removal tools, and I'm just going to slide these in the corners. And try and pull straight out. After we remove that piece, that'll expose these two Phillips head bolts. So we're just going to take them out. Now that will allow this entire trim assembly to pop off. So we want to pull that backwards and up. I'm going to start in the back here and kind of pop that out. Get the tape out of the way. Next we're going to remove this trim piece, and then we're going to pull the boot up over the lockout. I'm going to start in the back here and then pull the front out and just pull straight up. That will then expose these two Phillips head bolts. I'll remove those. Then now that we remove those two bolts at the back of the console, in the beginning of the video, we're going to pull the center console up and back and out of the way. We'll pop this up in the front first, and then just lift the entire console. That'll expose these two wires. I'm going to start with the bottom wire, press the tab in, pull it out. For this white connector, there's a tab on the bottom. I'm going to press in. I'm going to pull right out. Now that exposes these two Phillips head screws. I'm going to remove those two. Then we need to separate these two pieces right here at this seam. I'm going to take my flathead screwdriver, push that tab in. See if I can get this to pry apart. There it goes. Next is we are going to just remove these two pieces here. That we just pull straight back. Move that down to the side. I'm just going to push that to the side there. Next, these two white clips, we're going to pull these off. You can just pull them straight off, or you can kind of twist and pull. in this entire rubber boot, I'm just going to pull up and out over the lockout. Now that exposes these 4 12mm bolts. Now this metal ring can come out. Sharp edges can scratch your dash, so I'm going to slowly pull that out. Next, that exposes these 3 10mm bolts. And now that we got those 3 bolts removed, we're ready to go underneath the car. So now that we're under the car, I'm going to have to pull this boot back to expose the bottom of the shifter. I'm going to use a pick to just grab the boot and try and pull it off rather than use my fingers. So once you get the boot up out of the way, now there's a retaining clip here that we need to use the snap ring pliers to pull that clip off.
Right there.
And then we'll pull off this plastic washer, or it's a metal washer. We'll pull this metal washer off. And then all we need to do is push the shifter linkage through the bottom of the shifter rod. Now we can go back up inside the car. Now that we're back inside the car, I'm just going to grab the shifter assembly and just pull it out. It might be a little tough because that rubber boot, we have to pull that up through, but it will come out. I'll move that out of the way. Now that we have the factory shifter out of the car, we're ready to transfer some components over from this shifter to our Billetworkz shifter. To start, I want to pull this boot off. Again, I'm just going to use a pick. Just sometimes easier to. I'll pull this boot off. Then we need to remove this snap ring here. We're going to take our snap ring pliers again. That'll release pressure on that spring, so just be careful. That'll slide out. And we can pull this off that we'll need. We're going to pop this white cap off. Slide that off. So we don't need the shifter rod, we don't need the lockout, we don't need the spring anymore, and we don't need that snap ring anymore. I'm going to take apart our Billetworkz short shifter. Take these 2 bolts out. The lockout will slide right off. I'm going to remove this bolt. Now this will slide down, relieving some pressure on that spring. Take our snap ring pliers. Remove this ring. Pull the washer off, pull the spring off, pull the lower portion of our reverse lockout off. Now we can slide some of the factory components back on. I'm going to take our cap here, slide that over, slide over the sheet metal piece. Then we can slide our reverse lockout back on. And you want to make sure that the larger side of this lockout is facing the same side that this part points outwards. So we'll just slide that the whole way down. Slide our spring on, put the washer back on, put the retaining ring back on. Snap that in the groove. And we'll slide this lower part of the reverse lockout back up to line it up with the slot. Drop our bolt in. Snug that up. It doesn't need to be super tight. Then we'll slide our reverse lockout back on. Now you might need to add some lubricant to this. We do try and put some lubricant on before shipping. We'll go ahead and slide this down. Line up the clearance hole with the tapped hole. You have to push up on the lower part just a little bit. Drop that bolt in. Kind of snug that. Drop the other side in. And I'll snug those up. Now we need to slide these boots back on. So I'm going to start with this boot. Using the pick does make things a lot easier. Now that's up and over, and that'll tuck up right against the bottom of this white part here. Now before we put the last boot on, we do need to take these plastic bushings from the factory shifter and put them into our shifter. So there are two pieces, one on each side. So I'm just going to push these out with a small flathead screwdriver. You can see it just starts to push them out. I'm going to push out the other side too. Then we can just insert them into our shifter. And now we can put this rubber boot back on our shifter. Now the small hole is going to go on first. So I'm going to reach through here and just pull that up and over. Now when this goes back in the car, this boot will face like this, but we'll have to reorient this after we put it back in the car anyways. So let's go back to the car. So now that we're back in the car, I'm going to go ahead and insert our shifter assembly back into the car. So we're going to shove this rubber boot down in first, and then just try and push everything down in. I'm going to try and get underneath it and pull it the entire way through, just so it doesn't interfere. And once you have that through far enough, then you can align this white bushing, and then that should drop right down in. We'll push down on that a little bit, and then we'll align this cover piece. Just going to double check, make sure that boot is out of the way. Yep, it's down and out of the way there. Then I'll take our shifter stop, and we want to make sure that our shifter is oriented correctly with this extrusion pointing towards the stop here. So now I'm just going to snug these bolts up a tiny bit. We're going to have to adjust this once we get the linkage connected. I just want to snug this so it doesn't push the shifter out of the assembly. So now you could do this from inside the car here or from underneath, but I'm going to take the rubber boot that's on the bottom of the shifter rod and pull that back to expose the bottom of the shifter. So then we can push the linkage into the bottom of our shifter rod. So I'm going to try and connect it up here, but it might be easier to get underneath the car to fish it through the hole. Nope, I think I got it. So as you can see, I did get that shifter linkage through the bottom of our shifter here. I was able to get it from the top of the car. You can also push it in through underneath the car here. But next is I'm going to put that metal washer back on. I'm going to take our snap ring pliers with the snap ring. Pop that right back on there. I'm going to make sure that's fully seated. Now I'll pull the boot back over the pivot, which I'm just going to use my pick again. Might have to go in from the other side and pull it. Yep, there you go. You want to make sure there's a little bit of movement, some clearance in that boot. That just keeps the dirt out. Now we can go back up inside the car. Now we're going to go back through and have to readjust this stop here. This is for the reverse lockout. So I'm just going to loosen these up a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and put the car in first gear and push this stop over just so we still have a little bit of movement in first gear. I'm going to snug these up. I'm going to check the function of the reverse lockout. So right there it's blocking us from reverse. If I pull up, it allows us to engage. I can put it in reverse. We're in first, over and up, and the reverse. Now for this rubber boot here, I'm going to try and keep this up on the lockout a little bit. Just to keep it from pinching in between the shifter stop and our lower portion of the lockout down there. I'm going to keep it right about there. Now it's up to you, but as you can see, the rubber boot that's underneath there, you can kind of see the imprints from that. We probably can just remove that and not reuse it. I'm going to go ahead and pull that off. So for this install, I'm just going to install this without that rubber boot. Just kind of cleans it up a little bit down in here. You don't notice that rubber boot imprint. It's not really much of a point for that rubber boot there because we already have a rubber boot underneath protecting it from the external. So of course, last step is install your Billetworkz shift knob. I'm going to start by threading on your jam nut. I'm going to thread that on the whole way. Now I'm just going to make sure that you can still engage reverse. Yep. You just want to make sure you still have that clearance. I'm going to thread on the threaded insert. And I'm going to lock the two together. Then once those are tight, you can thread the shift knob on. This is our Fusion with a matte black top and bottom with a leather weighted core. And then when you tighten this up, you're going to want to, of course, make sure your engraving is straight. But as this is tight, my engraving is a little bit crooked. So I'm going to spin it back off and readjust the threaded insert and jam nut. And I'm going to adjust it about the same amount that the engraving was off. This might just take a couple tries. That actually looks pretty good. Now that I've showed you how to install your Billetworkz short shifter in your 2022 BRZ, head to our website, or if you have any questions, just shoot us an email. We'll see you next time.